Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be with you today, and I have a special guest today. I would love to introduce you to Jacqueline Green, who is the founder of Great Parenting Simplified, and she's here to talk to us about, parenting tips and techniques. With the holidays coming up, there's just added stress, right? We're going out, we're seeing families, we're getting together. Schedules are changing, everything is changing, and as joyous and happy as those holidays are supposed to be, unfortunately, they also come with an underlying level of stress, and it just makes things even more difficult for parenting. And let's face it, moms, parenting doesn't come with a rule book. It's difficult every day of the week anyway. So I'm so excited to talk with Jacqueline. I have questions that are geared towards moms who are happily married or not so happily married. And I have questions that are geared towards moms who are single, divorced, hashtag it's complicated. So I hope that there's something here for everybody, and I hope that you enjoy our session. I'm so delighted to be here with Jacqueline. So Jacqueline, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm delighted to be here. And, the topic is so important because the holidays get people so stressed, even people, who are happily married. And I, for years, was in the category of someone whose marriage was very challenging, lots of gifts from those challenges, lots of gifts for me as a leader and a parent in rising up to those challenges. But I don't know if you want me to get into any details, but I had some pretty intense challenges in my past, and getting through them taught me so much that was part of the genesis of me becoming a parenting educator.
That's awesome. And it's so inspiring for other people, because you know what? Your story is very, very similar to so many other stories of the women that are in this group, for sure. So let's start talking. Yeah, sure.
Cindy, if I can just go ahead, I'll say one thing, which is that one of my lowest moments was taking my kids to a women's shelter. And at that point, the conflict had been escalating, and I realized that I was actually, someone said, "Are you waiting for him to hit you?" as opposed to blowing out a wall beside your face. And it was like, yes, I am. And suddenly realized, wow, that's not very smart, right? And that's part of the advantage of getting outside perspectives in whatever we're doing. And yet I have been able to raise two well-adjusted young adults, and my son's going in to be a teacher, and really break a cycle and break a pattern. And it's because of diving in and really looking at what could I do within that situation. So I'm so excited, because knowing that you've got people in the audience who are married, but with conflicts that are eroding the marriage, and then single parents who are really, really challenged with some of the conflicts. Let's dive in.
That is fantastic. It is so, it's horrible that you had to go through it, but ladies, use this as an inspiration. Right? When I tell you all the time that you are warriors, that you have done difficult things, and you will do, and you can overcome them. And you've overcome challenges, and just facing what it is, and to get to a better place moving on. So let's start talking about the holidays that are coming up. We have Thanksgiving coming up in 2 weeks from now, and then all the winter holidays are coming up. So with that change of schedule that we have, where everything is out of norm, there's a lot more decisions to be made, right? So bedtimes are changed, meals are different, snacks and cakes and candies and everything is different. So how can parents agree on things like this if they have a difference of opinion? Sometimes one parent is very rigid that the rules are the rules and we can't change it no matter what the holiday is. And the other parent's like, hey, it's Thanksgiving, let it go. So how can parents handle that without that conflict?
It's a really important issue. And one of the things I say that's quite different than other people is, while it is awesome if you can get on the same page with your partner, it is absolutely not necessary.
Wow.
And the reason why I say that is, again, keep in mind that, yeah, it's awesome if you both agree that 9 o'clock's bedtime and you stick with that throughout the holidays. But what happens when we don't agree and we model for our children how to handle disagreement? What does that do for their ability to negotiate the workplace, to negotiate conflicts at school, etc.? We have a lot of people nowadays expecting people around them to all agree. And it actually makes us weaker in many ways if we can't be open to different opinions. So with a co-parent, one of the things I really encourage is to take a little bit of a longer range view. You might be disagreeing in this moment, and what you're disagreeing about, you might be right, and you might need it to change. But what happens when we really focus and dial in that this can't happen anymore? Well, we bring a lot of pressure to the situation. And there's a lot of violence in that urgency. And the violence can look like us shutting our partner down in a disrespectful way that actually models for our children, if someone disagrees with you, it's okay to be disrespectful. Right?
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic perspective.
Well, it's a really powerful shift, because also think in your life of someone who you had a conflict with. If they approach it respectfully, are you more or less likely to eventually change?
Well, obviously, you're going to change if people treat you with respect,
And
right?
if you
And
shut
give
someone,
and take.
yes, and if you shut them down, and a lot of times now, when we're stressed, a lot of us as moms in particular, and moms parenting through the pandemic, parenting prior to the pandemic was a reason for moms to being crazy stressed. But parenting through the pandemic just took, that curve and kind of shot people all straight up. So of course, you're stressed, you will have probably been, barking at your partner and not being respectful some of the time. Correct and continue. Work on it in the future. But when you can say to your partner, like maybe you let it go. Maybe that night your kids go to bed at 10:30, but they didn't witness debilitating conflict that actually can contribute to them behaving worse the next day, watching the conflict. And that even includes sometimes our parents being harsh on our child, right? And that's hard to watch. But again, there's so much. I actually have an upcoming book, Strong Enough to Stay, Work It Out or Leave Happy. And part of the premise of that book is if you get all the way to divorce, all these things get that much harder. So if you can just start saying, in that moment, I don't like how my partner's treating my child, but what can I do to help reduce my partner's stress? Because chances are they're barking at your child, because they're stressed.
Correct.
So as soon as you weigh in, which we all want to do to protect our child right there in that moment, what have you done to your partner's stress? What's going to be inevitable? You're going to be having more conflict, but now it's going to be interpersonal. And is your co-parent going to like your child more?
Yeah, and you've undermined your co-parent, and you've done a lot of things, and it's all a negative cycle, and it just keeps repeating.
Totally.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Do you think that divorced or separated parents should celebrate the holidays together as a family with the children, or should they each do their own thing?
Okay, that's a great question too, because it really depends. If you are able to get along with your co-parenting partner well enough, that might make a lot of sense, right? Depends though on the levels of conflict, depends on if you're going to get together and there's going to be fighting happening. We sometimes put our children's needs ahead of ours. We often do.
We usually do that.
Exactly.
Isn't that what it means to be a mom?
Well, and it's at our children's peril, not just our peril, because the research is conclusive. Stressed out parents lash out at their kids. They can't help it. We can't help it. Been there, done that. Pre-women's shelter, I was screaming at my kids really inappropriately, which interestingly enough enraged my husband. So we had this horrible pattern going, right? And my behavior was not right either. It was not right to be yelling at my kids, but I needed to lower my stress. So as a mom, or a dad, don't get together with your co-parenting partner because it's the best for your kids. Do it if you got your conflict well enough that it can be an amicable experience, then it's amazing to go there. If you can have kids, my ex-husband and I don't have any communication, and there's potentially safety concerns to this day. And that doesn't mean my kids have got new routines. Well, we had to get new routines as separated people, and they've gone on to have great lives, right? So we have to work with what we have and let go of those ideals. And Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever you celebrate, Hanukkah, look, whenever you put an ideal on it and you try and live up to the ideal, you're going to increase your tension, and you actually can rob your children of the unique experience of what Christmas is like for your family.
So you talked about starting things new. we have a hard time doing that, right? Because a lot of people are so stuck on it's always been this way. It's always been this way. This is how we've always celebrated it. So how can a newly separated or divorced mom be okay with it's not going to look the way it looked before?
Yeah. Reach out for support. It's one of the key things. And actually our stress levels are physiologically, we are designed when we're stressed to reach out for support. It's a really brilliant thing, because if we're in danger, or if we're in a situation that could lead to danger, and a stressed out parent is a situation that can lead to danger, because we are less resilient if our stress levels stay redlined. So we're meant to reach out for support. So reach out to your friends, counselors, that type of support services. Reach out, to you, Cindy, get some support in whatever area you need. And going back to work can be a really huge support I know your demographic is women, and for women who have often done the self-sacrificing thing and lost confidence and lost some of our, joie de vivre, our joy of life, right? As a result.
Right.
So focus on yourself. And if you're by yourself, take some of those things you always wished you could do, but the kids were preventing you. Maybe pick one or two of those things and get some support to doing those things over the holidays.
And you talked about that, being by yourself. So how can, for single moms, there most likely will be some part of the holiday that they are by themselves.
Yes.
Okay, because they're sharing holidays, they're sharing days, so they're not getting all of it. How can you cope with that without spending the whole day in a dark room crying, eating Haagen-Dazs? How can you cope with that?
So my very first Christmas alone, and to back up a little bit, my ex and I, after 6 months apart, he promised not to do anything else physically ever again, and almost perfectly held that line. And I did find myself 14 years later needing to leave. Safety concerns did reemerge, and I needed to leave. So that very first Christmas, to my horror, he talked to them first. However it went, that's my perception. They spent with him. So Christmas Day, and of course I felt like, wait a minute, how could that be that he would get?
I was rejected. He's been abusive, and I was the rejected parent.
Totally. So what I ended up doing is I found another woman I knew and didn't know super well, but this is the power of having a village. And it turns out her and I were both single at the same time. So I lived 2 hours away from a mountain resort. We actually went and we spent Christmas Day, and we did it a low budget way because we were single moms. She knew somebody who had a place in town. We stayed at that place, and then we went to the big fancy mountain lodge and hung out there and did a bunch of the festivities. It was so good because it was completely different. If I had stayed at home, I would have been surrounded with, the Christmas tree and no kids there. And I would have been in my head. And instead, I was in this beautiful place, and I haven't gone back yet. This was 7 years ago, but they have amazing spreads and amazing things that get done at resorts on holiday times, right? So stay in a cheap place in an area, and then go to some of these resort places and see if you can have a special meal or something like that.
A great suggestion. It's really kind of breaking out of that tradition, not allowing yourself to just sit around and feel sorry for yourself, putting on those big girl panties and saying, okay, either I could sit here in the dark by myself, or I can control my life. I can take charge. I can make this better.
Now, if I can say, Cindy, the biggest thing that I learned from my marriage with my ex that was so powerful, things were so grim, ironically enough, after I got back together with him, things started getting more intense in terms of some of the psychological dynamics. And he said, if you ever try and take the kids away again, I will make sure you are not successful. And so there was lots of crazy dynamics going on there. And I couldn't change him. I couldn't change the situation. I couldn't change him. So I was finally left with, okay, you can leave the planet, or you can start figuring out where your power lies and see what you can do to change things. And I shifted things. We now have, our nonprofit cooperative has parents from over 105 countries, parent coaches from 9 countries. So, and I started out depressed anxious, struggling, and really ripe for the relationship I walked into. So much is possible when we start saying, okay, I'm going to quit counting his inventory. And that was an Al-Anon thing, Friends and Family of Alcoholics. I'm going to quit counting his inventory. What did I do? How can I clean things up in my life? And it's phenomenal what happens when you stay focused on that. So exactly at Christmas, I could have felt sorry for myself. I could have gone down that road, but that makes me a victim. And as soon as I choose it, we're not aware of the choice often, but as soon as I choose to be a victim, I give my power up.
Away. Right. Then you have nothing.
Yeah.
Then you have nothing. It's just feeling sorry for yourself, how bad my life is. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ladies in this group who unfortunately have situations that are very similar to what you're talking about, which is really sad. But yeah, it's always let's reinvent in your personal life, with your children, with your relationships, with your careers. It's like, okay, it's not over. Let's fix it. Let's redesign. But it takes action. It takes courage. It takes going out and getting the help, whether it be me, whether it be you, whether it be whatever support system it is, to go out and realize, you know what, it's very interesting because I've had some women talk to me and say how, when you're in a bad marriage for 25 years and 25 years constantly being told that you're not good enough, that you're not enough. And I've been on one-on-one sessions with these women and they're crying. They're like, no one's ever complimented me before. No one's ever said that I was valuable, that it was worthwhile, that I could do these things. Yeah. And it's truly amazing to realize, I mean, what you've done is incredible.
But I always like to say, I am not special. What's special is that my stress levels drove me to do what makes us resourceful and resilient. And there's phenomenal research out there about how resourced people are resilient people. Yes. So that super mom image that we are torturing ourselves with, it's actually exactly opposite of what we need to do to be resilient. So I started going to Al-Anon. I found some support at my church. I started going to your moms groups and you name it, whatever I could go, I was there for support. So that's how I found
reaching out, the community, right? Not doing it alone.
And lots of coaching, counseling.
So important. Yeah. So important. Let's talk about gifts. And I think we should separate this topic, both talking about being married and being single, because it's actually very different. Now, when you were even in married families, we know that finances is a number one cause of divorce. So certainly arguing over how much is going to be spent on gifts, maybe for children, maybe for extended family members, could bring up a lot of stress. And it cannot always be answered in the way you were just talking above, about just kind of letting it go in the moment, because it could have a much larger magnitude if we're talking about, maybe going into debt. There are people who spend months and months paying off credit card bills on gifts. So the first thing is, let's talk about gifts when you're married, if you and your spouse do differently. And then let's talk about it if you were the single mom, because we know as a fact that single moms tend to be in a worse financial situation, at least in the beginning, than they were when they were married. Which might have them, not being able to buy as extravagant gifts as their ex can. And, especially when children are little, we don't want to be concerned about, let's say, buying love.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that from both perspectives. First, let's talk about it for a married couple and how we could handle that gift giving.
Okay, great.
And the prices.
They're both great questions. And you're right, there's big nuances between them.
Big difference.
We have, and I was just thinking of one of our parent coaches who had shared at some point in the past about lots of conflict with her her current partner, her only partner. And she's in a long-term marriage, has 3 kids, and a lot of dads can be in, and of course this applies to whatever configuration your marriage is, but a lot of dads are magnanimous, want to buy, and it's they're often in a very different role. One of the things that can be really effective is to agree on a budget ahead of time. And if you find out that your partner's already spent money, like, again, you're down that road of, if you keep the long range view, so this exact Christmas, well, even if you keep the long range view, instead of freaking out right away, get curious, ask some questions. So what were you thinking about that? And okay, hey, and we haven't had a budget conversation yet. What are you thinking that is reasonable for us for a budget? See if you can just open up a conversation about it instead of right away getting upset. One of the things we do a lot of with moms is teach mindset tools to help them lower their stressful reaction, because when we're having a knee-jerk stress reaction, we're in this primitive part of our brain, not in our beautiful prefrontal cortex. So try and get yourself into your prefrontal cortex and then see how to make this a longer range conversation instead of a criticism about what's already happened.
I like that a lot. The whole asking questions, because, and that's such an important concept in coaching in general. I was just coaching a client the other day who was talking to me about how she was firing somebody, and without even listening to what they had to say, they texted her why they couldn't show up. She just came right at them and said, you did this, you did this. And I said, all right, I'm going to tell you what I think you should have done, which would have been said, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right? Because they had always had a good relationship before. So what's going on? And then maybe you would be completely right to say that she's inappropriate, she shouldn't do this, but you didn't even give her a chance.
Right.
Right. So it's opening up, it's asking the questions, it's being curious so that you are able to see. And then you're right. Then you can have that discussion about finances, because maybe your partner hasn't even thought about it. Maybe you haven't even, a lot of people just kind of will just put it on the credit card and don't think about how long is it going to take me to pay it off? What is the long-term ramifications of this? Maybe we should come up with a budget.
And if we keep looking at ourselves, and that dynamic was 100% applicable to my ex and I, if we keep looking at ourselves, realistically, I sometimes make impulse purchases. And I can have mine nested within something else, or maybe they're not even impulse purchases, but I've said to myself, I'll give X amount to this, and this is how. Well, maybe I'm doing that type of calculation to say this is how I can justify this. Maybe my partner is too. So at least finding out, maybe they know of a bonus that's coming, or something like that, right? And interestingly enough, my criticism of my ex at first was also directed towards money he spent on me.
Wow.
Right?
So you thought he was spending too much money on you, or not enough?
I thought he was spending too much money, period. And realistically, I had some control issues there too, which one of the tools that I learned when I started getting support was to set that budget ahead of time so that he would also have a chance to agree on a budget. Because if you're part of creating something, you're way more likely, right, to want to make it work than if your partner just says you have to do X. Most of us have an automatic no to feeling like we're coerced.
And I think that the whole thing about how much money is being spent on gifts is actually just a small part of a much larger discussion about how we handle money in general.
Yes.
Okay. And what we buy and how we spend money and who's brown bagging it and who's buying lunch every day and all those other things. So I think it's just one factor, and we may use that because we're not communicating well, when we really want to be talking about money in general in a much bigger picture.
Absolutely. And investing in our leadership skills, which includes how to navigate the co-parenting stuff. We often end up, like, I had no idea that I was actually quite reactive. And it's very normal.
I think parents should be at least involved with paying bills together.
Yes.
Because if one person is paying all the bills and the other person doesn't know how much money is in the account, it could lead the other person to be in the dark, think that they have a lot less or a lot more than they really have.
Yep. And again, to reiterate one more time, if you in the short term can't get there, you can't get instant agreement on it, or even talk about it a few times, you can't get agreement. Keep the long range view of, okay, and I would love to talk to anyone who would want to talk about that. How do I shift this? And I like to talk about an ocean liner. If you imagine if it's heading off from New York, and say it's heading towards Africa, but it right away takes a 1 or 2 degree shift, you could end up in Europe. Could end up on a completely different continent. So keep remembering, the idea is to shift things and keep taking the pressure off on the moments, because it's going to make it easier to resolve your conflicts. You're going to be in this part of your brain instead of in that primitive reactive brain.
Such great insight. Such great insight. Let's talk, let's just quickly talk about the gift if you are that new time single parent or even a long time single parent, but you just don't have the resources. How can you give to your children and feel like you're giving them something special and not feel upset and guilty and angry that you can't give them more?
It's huge. And I hear from, I'm sure most people think of examples of a lot of people who talk about being aware that one of their parents was trying to buy their love, right? And we're nowadays really concerned about entitlement, rightfully so, because we are raising a more entitled generation than ever before. So trying to keep up with your partner, who's no longer your marital partner, but still your co-parenting partner, or your co-parent, if they don't feel like a partner in any way, shape, or form, trying to keep up with them. What message does that give your children? Because it actually gives your children the message that, oh, things matter so much that, mom's killing herself trying to provide what dad is providing. And it also, if it causes stress for you, and you maybe could have spent that money on yourself, having a little getaway when the kids are at your ex's for Christmas, instead of putting too much money into the kids, your stress level's going up. And then we're hoping our kids pick up somehow the idea that things don't matter. We've got to give them that by example. Like I'd like to say we want them to pick it up by osmosis, but we've got to be modeling it first. So maybe you take them to the zoo that might be inexpensive or might still be expensive, but maybe you take them for a 3-hour afternoon somewhere in your area, and you say, this is a special thing we're doing for this holiday that you get to decide what we do when we get there, or something. There's all sorts of ways that you can show that time and thought-provoking putting some thought into what your child might like can be more memorable even.
I love the idea of experiences. Okay, my kids are a little older. My kids are 20 and 24. But yeah, we always try to do a special event, a special experience. And if that was baking together, I love to bake, but if that was baking together for the holidays, if that was decorating the house together, if that was going to these special events, and like you said, not everything even has to cost money. And there are a lot of things for the holidays, walk-arounds and events and things that are free or very close to free, where you could go to special things and just buy a hot chocolate, okay? Yeah. Where you're not spending a lot, but you're having a whole, enjoyment of something. And I think it also speaks to that starting fresh, creating new traditions,
new rituals,
realizing that things can still be happy.
Yes. And I'll add one too that's amazing to do over the holidays, but really anytime, is build in some gratitude and some giving back. So maybe you do that wonderful baking, and maybe you bring some to the local.
We've done that. And you know what's great with kids is to have your kids get involved. To always have your kids get involved, because it's very easy for you to just send a check, but our kids don't understand that. But for our children to see, and for you to see, and for you to be part of that with them, really is a resonating thing for them. Yeah. Also, to see that you are pretty lucky. Yeah. Even in spite of everything that you have, that you are pretty lucky. And there's always somebody who has less than you do, and situations that are harder. And it makes it a little bit more difficult to feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah, which is so powerful. And empathy, just like entitlement's on the rise, empathy is dramatically
down.
When the research is conclusive about that as well. And so building in a routine that this is something that's important to us as our family. We do this.
I like that. We've always done that. What is your final advice regarding parenting and the holidays and getting through the next 6 or 7 weeks, and feeling okay and actually enjoying it?
Yeah. Lower your standards. And there's great research about when we aim actually for B's, we're more likely to get A's, but we're going to get even C's some of the time, D's. But if you aim for B's and you keep that long range view, there are so many Christmas traditions that I never nailed that I wanted to have happen, it doesn't actually matter. What I find crazy, my kids are 22 and 24, and what I find crazy is how much they cling to the ones that we did have, right? And they love the routines that we have. And some of them, like I felt, Christmas gingerbread houses, there's all sorts of ways I would like to have done things, but we had a tradition around how we did gingerbread houses. And to this day, my daughter, doesn't matter, we actually did them one year in January, because one of the years after my ex and I had separated, life was chaotic enough, and she was with him at one point, etc. We did them in January. She just needs that, few traditions that we really consistently nailed. So find 1, 2, 3 traditions, focus on them, make the rest be gravy, right? The rest is just a bonus if it happens to happen, because our stress levels, our kids want the feeling, that feeling of waking up and everything's perfect. And of course, we don't want them to think they need perfection, but perfection in the sense of the house feels lovely, and mom and dad, if they're still together, are doing their towards the end of their best, whatever that looks like. Not mom's been up since 2 in the morning trying to finish things.
Oh my goodness, how many houses are like that, right? And mom is so stressed out, so exhausted because she's been up all night, she's been cooking, she's been doing everything, doing it by herself, and everything has to be perfect. And when we let go on that it has to be absolutely perfect, and we go on good enough, we could be a lot happier with what's happening and enjoy the moment.
Exactly.
I think that's a really big thing about it, is to be present. When we spend so much time concentrating on all the details, we're not there, and we're not part of it.
And if I can piggyback, one last thing is also keep enlisting help, because maybe your mom or your dad or someone in your family can read a Christmas story. And I'm just using Christmas but whatever, read a Hanukkah story, read a Kwanzaa story, whatever, from video while you're having a shower or a bath or taking a few minutes to yourself. Let other people serve your family too, because you're actually giving them a gift as well.
Yes. That is amazing advice. I'm so happy that you've been here. It's been amazing. I'm here with Jacqueline Green from Great Parenting Simplified. She has some great programs. I'm going to put the links below when I post this, so that if you're interested in reaching out to her, I encourage you to take the initiative, reach out, see what she has to offer. And, maybe it's something that would be helpful for you, whether you are married or not married, right? Just to kind of make life better, make life simpler, and look at the bigger picture and stop fighting the minutia.
It makes all the difference. And the link that I'm going to have for you, it gives you the chance to have a free consult with either myself or one of the coaches.
That's great.
Or you can just check out the website and check out some of our offerings. But because we really believe in being able to meet with you too, if you'd like, and then we can discuss your unique situation and how we might be able to help you. So
that's fantastic. I know that you offer group programs and one-on-one programs and a lot of great resources. I was actually introduced to you from one of the wonderful women in this private Facebook group right here. So I'm so thankful to her as well that she reached out and said that we had to talk. So thank you, Jacqueline, for joining us today. And I hope a lot of women pop on over and check you out.
Well, you're so welcome. And I want to say that mom just raved about your work, and she said, you have to talk to Cindy because you helped her with that really critical transition from having felt like she'd lost herself in many ways, and her skills didn't feel as up to date as they could be. And I know that she's really thriving. So, she's got the divorce situation to deal with.
I remember we started working together because she wanted to get back to the workforce. She went to visit her parents. And her ex told her during that time, don't come back. And that's harsh.
Very.
That is harsh. She took the kids to visit her parents, and while she was visiting, he said, don't come back to me. So, and she had to create a whole new life.
And she has. And the support you've given her was critical for that.
So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.